The brass casings scattered across the concrete floor caught the dying Afghan sun like scattered coins. Lieutenant Colonel Kaya Ghost Thorne swept them into neat piles, her movements methodical, almost meditative. The shooting range at Forward Operating Base Blackwater fell silent except for the whisper of wind through the razor wire and her soft humming, an old Appalachian tune her grandmother used to sing while cleaning rifles on their Kentucky farm. She didn't belong here, and everyone knew it. At 42, Ghost was past her prime for combat operations, relegated to training rotations and administrative duties that kept her safely behind the wire. The younger pilots called her the fossil when they thought she couldn't hear, their voices carrying the casual cruelty of those who'd never watched friends die in cockpits thousands of feet below. The irony wasn't lost on her. Kaya Thorne had more combat hours than half the squadron combined, 2 tours in Iraq, 3 in Afghanistan, with a Silver Star and Purple Heart collecting dust in a Denver storage unit. But that was before the incident, before the inquiry, before her hands developed the subtle tremor that only appeared when she thought no one was watching. The attack came like summer lightning, sudden, violent, and completely without warning. The first mortar round hit the eastern perimeter at 13:47 hours, sending a pillar of black smoke into the crystalline desert sky. Ghost's hands stilled on the broom handle, her instincts flooding back like muscle memory. The base alarm hadn't even started wailing when the second round impacted closer, rattling the windows of the range building. Contact, contact, contact. The radio crackled to life, voices overlapping in controlled chaos. Multiple mortars inbound, Grid 40, 1 SMB 12,345, 67,890. All personnel to hardened positions immediately. Through the reinforced windows, Ghost watched Marines sprinting across the compound, their gear clanking, boots pounding against sun-baked earth. A Humvee roared past, its gunner swiveling his .50 cal toward the perimeter. The familiar symphony of combat preparation, a dance she knew by heart but hadn't performed in 2 years. That's when Staff Sergeant Marcus Reaper Valdez burst through the door, his face streaked with sweat and cordite. The Navy SEAL moved with the fluid precision of a man accustomed to violence, his eyes scanning the room before settling on Ghost. In his hands, he carried an Mk-11 Mod 0 sniper rifle, its scope glinting like a predator's eye. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cutting through the growing chaos outside, "I need to know, can you still shoot?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke from a fired round. Outside, another mortar exploded, closer this time, and the building shuddered. Ghost looked at the rifle in his hands, then at her own, steady now, purposeful. "Why are you asking, Sergeant?" His eyes never left hers. "Because our Overwatch just went down, and you're the only sniper-qualified officer left on base." The familiar weight of destiny pressed against her shoulders as another explosion shook the desert floor. Ghost set down the broom and reached for the rifle, her fingers finding their home on the familiar curves of military precision. The weapon felt like an extension of herself, a deadly instrument she'd mastered through thousands of hours of training and real-world application. "Where do you need me?" she asked, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who'd faced death before and emerged victorious. Reaper's expression shifted from desperation to something approaching respect. "Tower 7, elevated position, 360-degree view of the perimeter. Intel suggests this is a coordinated assault, at least 20 hostiles moving in from multiple directions." Ghost nodded, already calculating angles and wind patterns in her head. The skills never truly left, they just lay dormant like seeds waiting for the right conditions. She slung the rifle across her back with practiced ease, muscle memory, overriding the administrative rust that had accumulated during her exile from combat operations. The run to Tower 7 felt like swimming upstream against a river of fleeing personnel. Medics rushed wounded Marines toward the aid station, while engineers worked frantically to establish defensive positions. The controlled chaos of combat preparation surrounded them, but Ghost moved through it with the calm certainty of a professional returning to her element. "Ghost, this is Blackwater Actual," her radio crackled as they climbed the tower's steel steps. "Sitrep on Overwatch capability." She keyed the mic, her breathing steady despite the sprint. "Blackwater Actual, Ghost, moving to Tower 7 now. We'll have eyes on target in 2 mics." "Copy, Ghost. Be advised, enemy count now estimated at 30 plus. They've got our range dialed in." The tower platform offered a commanding view of the surrounding desert, its concrete barriers scarred from previous attacks. Ghost settled into the shooting position, her body automatically adjusting to the familiar geometry of precision marksmanship. The rifle's scope revealed the approaching threat, figures moving with military precision across the rocky terrain, using cover and concealment with practiced skill. "Reaper, I count 12 tangos advancing from the North Ridge, approximately 800 meters out," she reported, her voice now carrying the cool professionalism that had earned her the call sign years ago. "They're moving in fire teams, coordinated advance." "Copy, Ghost. Permission to engage at your discretion." Through the scope, she watched the lead figure raise what appeared to be an RPG launcher. The mathematics of trajectory and timing flooded her mind: wind speed, bullet drop, target movement. Her finger found the trigger, and the world narrowed to the space between heartbeats. The shot broke clean, the rifle's recoil familiar against her shoulder. 800 meters away, the RPG team leader dropped, his weapon clattering uselessly against the rocks. The other fighters immediately sought cover, their coordinated advance temporarily disrupted. "Tango down," Ghost reported, already acquiring her next target, adjusting fire to secondary threats. Below in the compound, she could hear Reaper coordinating the ground defense, his voice calm and professional over the radio chatter. Marines moved between defensive positions, while mortars continued to rain down sporadically, each explosion sending shockwaves through the desert air. Ghost's second shot eliminated a machine gunner who'd found elevation on a distant ridge. Her third dropped a spotter trying to laser designate targets for the mortar teams. Each shot was precise, calculated, lethal, the product of years of training and experience that couldn't be erased by administrative reassignment or political maneuvering. "Blackwater Actual, Ghost," she keyed the radio between shots. "Enemy advance halted on northern approach. Recommend ground teams move to secure the high ground while they're pinned down." "Copy, Ghost. Ground teams moving now. Outstanding work up there." Outstanding work. The words carried weight she'd almost forgotten, the simple acknowledgement of professional competence, of skills tested under fire and found adequate. For the first time in 2 years, Ghost felt like herself again. The battle continued for another hour, waves of attackers probing different sections of the perimeter while Ghost provided overwatch and precision fire support. Her shots were economical, each round carefully placed to maximum effect. She didn't waste ammunition on suppressive fire or targets of opportunity. Every bullet had a purpose, every trigger pulled deliberate and final. As the sun began to set over the Afghan desert, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson, the last of the attackers withdrew into the mountainous terrain beyond effective rifle range. The base fell quiet except for the distant rumble of helicopters bringing reinforcements and medical evacuation. Ghost cleared her rifle and began the familiar post-combat routine, cleaning the barrel, checking the scope alignment, inventorying remaining ammunition. Her hands moved with automatic precision, muscle memory guiding actions performed thousands of times before. Reaper climbed the tower steps, his face showing the exhaustion that followed intense combat. "Final count, 14 enemy KIA, no friendly casualties. Command wants to see you for debrief." She nodded, already knowing what the debrief would entail. Questions about her shooting, recommendations for medals she didn't want, discussions about returning to active combat status. The familiar machinery of military recognition grinding into motion. "Sergeant," she said, looking out over the desert where shadows lengthened between the rocks, "why did you come to me? There were other qualified shooters on base." Reaper was quiet for a moment, cleaning his own weapon with practiced movements. "Ma'am, I've worked with shooters all over the world. Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, places that don't exist on official maps. I've seen good ones and great ones and a few who transcended the craft entirely." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "I've heard the stories about Ghost, about Syria, about the siege of Tal Afar, about shots that shouldn't have been possible. Today, I saw why those stories are told." Ghost felt something shift inside her chest, a recognition that went beyond professional competence into the realm of legacy and reputation, earned through blood and precision. The young pilots could call her what they wanted, but they'd never understand the weight of actually pulling the trigger when lives hung in the balance. The desert wind picked up as darkness approached, carrying the scent of cordite and distant rain. Ghost shouldered her rifle and prepared for the long walk back to debriefing, back to the questions and forms and official recognition that would follow. But for the first time in 2 years, she walked with the confidence of someone who remembered exactly who she was. In the growing darkness below, Marines moved through their post-combat routines while radio chatter coordinated casualty reports and resupply requests. The base had held, the attack repelled, and somewhere in the Afghan mountains, surviving attackers would carry stories of impossible shots and a ghost who appeared when needed most. Command debriefing took place in the operations center, a windowless room filled with maps, radios, and the constant hum of computers processing intelligence data. Colonel James Wright, the base commander, sat across from Ghost at a metal table, his expression carefully neutral. Behind him, intelligence officers took notes while communications specialists monitored radio traffic. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne," Wright began, consulting a tablet filled with after-action reports. "14 confirmed kills, 0 friendly casualties, successful defense of a coordinated assault. It's the kind of performance that gets written up in tactical manuals." Ghost nodded but said nothing. She'd been through enough debriefings to know when praise was building toward something else, usually a request or assignment she wouldn't like. "Your shooting today was remarkable," Wright continued. "Staff Sergeant Valdez reports shots at ranges exceeding 800 meters under combat conditions, the kind of marksmanship we typically see only from Tier 1 operators." "I did my job, sir." Wright leaned forward slightly. "Ghost, I'll be direct. We need shooters like you back in active rotation. Not training assignments, not administrative duties, real combat operations where your skills can make a difference." The offer hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Ghost studied Wright's face, reading the calculation behind his words. He needed her skills, but more than that, he needed to know she was reliable under pressure. Today's performance had answered that question definitively. "What kind of operations?" she asked. "The kind where precision matters more than politics," Wright replied. "Special reconnaissance, high-value target elimination, situations where one shot can change the outcome of an entire mission." Through the op center windows, Ghost could see helicopters landing on the airfield, their rotors churning up clouds of dust that glowed like gold in the setting sun. Wounded Marines were being loaded onto medical evacuation flights, while fresh troops disembarked to reinforce the base perimeter. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Wright nodded, clearly expecting that response. "Think about it, Ghost, but don't think too long. The war doesn't wait for anyone to make up their mind." The debriefing concluded with the usual paperwork and official commendations. Ghost signed forms, provided tactical recommendations, and answered questions from intelligence officers who wanted every detail about enemy movements and capabilities. The familiar bureaucracy of post-combat administration ground through its routine procedures. Outside the ops center, the night air carried the sound of generators and distant radio chatter. Ghost walked toward her quarters, the rifle still slung across her back, her mind processing the events of the day and the implications of Wright's offer. She found Reaper waiting by her barracks, cleaning his sidearm with the methodical care of a professional warrior. He looked up as she approached, his expression thoughtful. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Ghost paused at her door. "Speak freely, Sergeant." "Why did they pull you from combat operations?" "Because whatever the reason was, it's bullshit. I've worked with Delta, Dev Gru, SAS, and I've never seen shooting like that under pressure." The question she'd been avoiding for 2 years hung between them in the Afghan darkness. Ghost looked up at the stars, brilliant and cold in the desert sky, and made a decision about truth and trust that would define everything that followed. "2 years ago, I made a shot I shouldn't have made," she said quietly. "Clean kill on a high-value target, but there was a child in the compound. Didn't see her until after the round was fired. She wasn't injured, wasn't even close to the impact zone, but the optics were problematic." Reaper nodded slowly, understanding the political calculations that governed modern warfare. "So they benched you." "Pending psychological evaluation," they said. "Assessment of judgment under pressure. The evaluation never quite concluded that I was fit for combat operations." Ghost's voice carried the weight of bureaucratic betrayal, the slow strangulation of a career by administrative cowardice. "But you kept training." "Every day, because I knew eventually someone would need me to make the shot that mattered." Reaper holstered his sidearm and stood up, his movement carrying the fluid precision of a career operator. "Ma'am, for what it's worth, I've made shots that kept me awake at night. We all have. The difference is whether you learn from them or let them break you." Ghost felt something shift in her chest, not quite forgiveness, but perhaps understanding. The burden of precision marksmanship wasn't just technical skill, it was the psychological weight of deciding who lived and who died from impossible distances. "Get some rest, Sergeant. Tomorrow brings new challenges." "Yes, ma'am." "And Ghost, when you make your decision about Wright's offer, remember that some of us know exactly who you are and what you're capable of." Inside her quarters, Ghost finally set down the rifle and began the familiar routine of post-combat maintenance. She field-stripped the weapon, cleaned each component, and reassembled it with the automatic precision of someone who'd performed the task thousands of times. The mechanical ritual provided structure to thoughts that threatened to spiral beyond control. 2 years of exile, 2 years of administrative limbo, and now suddenly she was valuable again. The irony wasn't lost on her. It had taken an enemy attack to remind everyone why precision marksmanship remained relevant in an age of drones and guided missiles. Sometimes, the war still came down to one person, one rifle, one shot that changed everything. Outside her window, the base settled into its nighttime routine. Guard rotations changed, radio chatter decreased to essential communications, and the desert reclaimed its ancient silence. Ghost sat on her bunk, cleaning her personal sidearm while her mind processed the day's events and their implications for whatever came next. The offered rifle lay across her lap, its familiar weight a reminder of skills that never truly atrophied, only lay dormant waiting for the right moment. Tomorrow would bring new decisions, new challenges, and the eternal question that haunted every professional warrior, whether the cost of being needed was worth the price of being used. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, Ghost fell asleep to the sound of her own breathing instead of the echoes of doubt and administrative second-guessing. Tonight, she slept like someone who remembered exactly who she was and why it mattered. Dawn arrived with the mechanical precision of military routine, reveille at 500, chow formation at 5:30, duty assignments at 600. Ghost woke before the alarm, her internal clock calibrated by decades of military service. Outside her window, the Afghan sun painted the mountains in shades of copper and gold, while helicopters began their morning patrol flights. She found Wright waiting for her in the mess hall, his presence among the breakfast crowd deliberate and unmistakable. The colonel sat alone at a corner table, nursing coffee that had probably been brewing since midnight. His expression suggested he'd spent the night thinking about their conversation and the implications of her potential return to active duty. "Sleep well, Ghost?" he asked as she approached with her tray. "Well enough, sir." She settled across from him, nodding the intelligence folders stacked beside his plate. Whatever conversation was coming, it involved classified information and operational planning beyond yesterday's defensive action. Wright pushed one of the folders toward her. "I need you to look at something. Hypothetically, of course, since you haven't officially accepted reassignment to active status." Ghost opened the folder, her eyes immediately drawn to satellite imagery of a compound nestled in the mountains along the Pakistani border. The photographs showed a fortified position with multiple buildings, guard towers, and clear fields of fire extending in all directions. Someone had spent considerable effort making this location difficult to assault. "High-value target?" she asked, already calculating potential shooting positions and ranges. "The highest. Intelligence indicates a senior Taliban commander operating from this location, coordinating attacks throughout the region. 3 previous attempts to eliminate him have failed due to the compound's defensive advantages." Ghost studied the imagery more carefully, noting the elevation changes and potential concealment positions. The target compound sat on a plateau approximately 1,200 meters from the nearest viable shooting position, an extreme range even for specialized equipment and expert marksmanship. 1,200 meters, she said. "In mountain terrain with unpredictable wind patterns, it's doable but barely." Wright leaned forward slightly. The previous attempts used indirect fire, mortars, guided missiles, airstrikes. Each time the target escaped through an extensive tunnel system. This requires precision, something that can reach out and touch him before he knows we're there. Through the mess hall windows, Ghost watched Marines beginning their morning physical training, their synchronized movements a testament to military discipline and preparation. Young faces, most of them barely out of their teens, preparing for a war that had been ongoing since before they were born. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "Intelligence window closes in 72 hours. After that, the target relocates to a position we can't reach." Wright's voice carried the urgency of operational necessity, the pressure that drove military decision-making in dynamic combat environments. Ghost closed the folder, her decision crystallizing around the familiar weight of professional responsibility. Someone needed to make an impossible shot under impossible conditions, and she was uniquely qualified for that burden. "I'll need specialized equipment. M24A3 SWS with match-grade ammunition, wind measurement devices, updated topographical surveys of the target area." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone accepting a mission that would likely define the rest of her career. "Already arranged. Transport leaves at 1200 hours for advanced position. You'll have a full reconnaissance team and extraction support." Wright stood up, leaving the intelligence folder on the table between them. "Ghost, I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about eliminating a single target. Success here reopens doors that have been closed for 2 years. Failure—" he left the sentence unfinished, but the implications were clear enough. "Understood, sir." After Wright left, Ghost remained at the table, studying the satellite imagery and mentally preparing for the most challenging shot of her career. 1,200 meters in mountain terrain against a target who'd survived 3 previous elimination attempts. The mathematics of trajectory and wind drift would be complex enough without adding the psychological pressure of professional redemption. Reaper appeared at her table as if summoned by some invisible signal, his presence carrying the solid reassurance of professional competence. "Ma'am, heard you might need some ground support for a long-range interdiction mission." Ghost looked up from the imagery. "You volunteered." "Let's just say I have experience with impossible shots and the people who make them." His expression suggested knowledge of her reputation that went beyond yesterday's defensive action, deeper understanding of skills demonstrated in places that didn't appear on official maps. It's a 1,200-meter shot in mountain terrain against a hardened target. Even with perfect conditions, the probability of success is marginal. Reaper settled into the chair Wright had vacated, his eyes studying the satellite photographs with professional interest. "Ma'am, I've been doing this for 15 years. I've learned that probability calculations mean nothing when you're working with someone who operates beyond normal parameters." Ghost felt a familiar stirring, the quiet confidence that came from working with professionals who understood their craft at the deepest level. The shot ahead would require not just individual skill, but perfect coordination between spotter and shooter, seamless communication under extreme pressure. "What's your experience with extreme-range observation and wind calling?" she asked. "Fallujah, Ramadi, 3 deployments in the Korangal Valley. I've spotted for shots out to 1,100 meters in conditions that shouldn't have been possible." Reaper's voice carried the matter-of-fact tone of someone recounting professional qualifications rather than bragging about extraordinary achievements. Ghost nodded, her mental preparation shifting from individual challenge to team coordination. The mission ahead would require trust at a level that could only be built through shared understanding of stakes and consequences. Equipment inspection at 1100 hours. Transport at 1200. We'll use the flight time to review wind tables and establish communication protocols. "Yes, ma'am," and Ghost. "Yesterday proved something important. Today we get to do it again when it really counts." The morning passed in the familiar rhythm of mission preparation. Equipment checks, communication tests, route planning, and the subtle psychological preparation that preceded high-stakes operations. Ghost cleaned and zeroed her rifle while Reaper calibrated observation equipment and studied topographical maps with obsessive attention to detail. The specialized M24A3 sniper weapon system felt like an extension of her will, its precision engineering matched to her own capabilities through years of training and experience. The match-grade ammunition had been hand-loaded for optimal ballistic performance, each cartridge a small miracle of metallurgy and chemistry designed to maintain accuracy across impossible distances. At 1200 hours, they boarded a US-60 Black Hawk for insertion into the mountains along the Afghan-Pakistani border. The helicopter lifted off smoothly, climbing toward altitudes where the air grew thin and wind patterns became increasingly unpredictable. Below them, the landscape shifted from desert plains to rocky foothills, then finally to the stark beauty of high mountain terrain. Ghost watched the ground pass beneath them, already calculating angles and positions for the shot that would define everything that followed. Somewhere ahead, in a fortified compound 1,200 meters from the nearest concealment, waited a target whose elimination could change the entire dynamic of regional conflict. The helicopter's rotors beat a steady rhythm against the mountain air as they flew toward a rendezvous with destiny, and the ultimate test of skills honed across decades of professional warfare. Ghost checked her equipment one final time, her mind entering the quiet space where doubt disappeared and only precision remained. The insertion point lay hidden in a valley 20 kilometers from the target compound, far enough to avoid detection, but close enough for ground movement under cover of darkness. The helicopter touched down briefly, long enough for Ghost and Reaper to disembark with their equipment, then lifted off immediately to avoid creating a signature that enemy surveillance might detect. They moved through the night with the careful precision of professionals operating in hostile territory, using natural terrain features to mask their approach, while navigation equipment guided them toward the predetermined shooting position. The mountains around them rose like ancient sentinels, their peaks sharp against stars that seemed close enough to touch. Ghost carried the M24A3 broken down for movement, its components distributed across her pack system for optimal weight distribution. Reaper moved beside her with the spotting scope and wind measurement devices, his movement as silent as her own. They communicated through hand signals and shared understanding rather than radio traffic that might compromise their position. The climb to their final position took 6 hours of careful movement through terrain that tested every aspect of their physical conditioning and tactical experience. Rocky slopes gave way to narrow ledges, while altitude made each breath a conscious effort requiring mental discipline to overcome physical limitation. At 400 hours, they reached the shooting position, a natural rock formation that provided concealment and a clear line of sight to the target compound 1,200 meters away. Ghost began the methodical process of establishing her shooting position, while Reaper set up observation equipment and began his systematic study of environmental conditions. Through the spotting scope, the target compound appeared as a collection of rectangular buildings arranged around a central courtyard, with guard towers providing overlapping fields of fire. Intelligence suggested the high-value target maintained a routine of appearing on the main building's roof each morning at sunrise to conduct radio communications with subordinate commanders. "Range 1,200 meters confirmed," Reaper whispered into his throat mic. "Wind currently 5 knots from the northeast, but conditions are variable. Target building shows no movement yet." Ghost settled into her shooting position, the rifle's bipod legs adjusted for optimal stability against the rock surface. The scope revealed individual details of the compound's construction: windows, doorways, the precise geometry of walls and roof lines that would define success or failure in the coming engagement. "Ballistics calculated and loaded," she replied softly. "Scope adjusted for 1,200 meters with current environmental factors, standing by for target acquisition." The sun rose slowly over the Afghan mountains, painting the sky in gradual shades of amber and gold. In the valley below, the target compound began showing signs of activity as guards changed positions and smoke began rising from cooking fires. The rhythms of daily life proceeding normally, while death waited patiently on a distant mountainside. At 6:30 hours, a figure emerged onto the rooftop of the main building, carrying what appeared to be radio equipment. Through the scope, Ghost could see a bearded man in traditional Afghan clothing, his movements confident and unhurried as he began setting up communication gear. "Target acquired," she whispered. "Adult male, matching description, conducting communications setup on primary building roof." Reaper adjusted the spotting scope, confirming target identification through comparison with reconnaissance photographs. Positive identification confirmed. Wind holding steady at 5 knots northeast, but showing signs of shifting pattern. Ghost's breathing slowed as her finger found the trigger, her entire focus narrowing to the space between heartbeats. The mathematics of extreme-range precision shooting filled her mind: bullet drop, wind drift, the countless variables that determined success or failure across impossible distances. The target moved with casual confidence, unaware that 1,200 meters away, death waited with mechanical precision. He raised a radio to his lips, beginning the morning communication routine that had made him vulnerable to observation and targeting. "Wind shift," Reaper whispered urgently. "Now reading 7 knots, slight backing to nor-northeast." Ghost made minute scope adjustments, compensating for the changing environmental conditions with the automatic precision of someone who'd performed similar calculations thousands of times before. Her breathing entered the controlled rhythm that preceded every perfect shot, the intersection of skill, preparation, and opportunity. "On target," she whispered, "firing on your count." Wind steady, target static, send it. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the mountain valley, the sound rolling between peaks like distant thunder. 1,200 meters away, the figure on the rooftop dropped immediately, his radio equipment scattering across concrete as the precisely placed shot found its target with mechanical finality. Target down, Reaper confirmed through the spotting scope. Clean hit, no movement. Mission accomplished. Ghost began the immediate post-shot routine, clearing the rifle, gathering equipment, preparing for extraction. Around the compound below, she could see figures running between buildings as guards responded to the sudden violence that had reached across impossible distance to eliminate their commander. "This is Ghost, mission complete," she radioed to extraction support. "One shot, target eliminated, ready for pickup at primary extraction point." "Copy, Ghost, outstanding work. Extract inbound, ETA 20 minutes. They moved quickly away from the shooting position, using predetermined routes that would mask their withdrawal while compound security focused on the immediate area around their dead commander. The shot had been perfect. One bullet, one target, one moment that changed the tactical situation across an entire region. As they reached the extraction point, Ghost felt the familiar mixture of professional satisfaction and psychological exhaustion that followed successful extreme-range engagements. The shot had been among the most challenging of her career, requiring every aspect of her training and experience to achieve success under impossible conditions. The helicopter appeared on schedule, its rotors creating dust clouds as it settled onto the rocky landing zone. Ghost and Reaper boarded quickly, their equipment secured as the aircraft lifted off for the return flight to forward operating base Blackwater. During the flight, Ghost cleaned her rifle with automatic precision while her mind processed the morning's events and their implications. Wright had been clear about the stakes. Success would reopen doors that had been closed for 2 years, while failure would have ended her combat career permanently. The compound below grew smaller as they gained altitude, but she could still see smoke rising from the building where her shot had found its target. Somewhere in those buildings, subordinate commanders were already beginning the complex process of succession and revenge planning that followed the elimination of senior leadership. "Hell of a shot, ma'am," Reaper said over the helicopter's intercom system. 1,200 meters in mountain terrain with variable wind conditions. That's the kind of shooting that gets written about in tactical manuals. Ghost nodded but remained focused on equipment maintenance, her mind already shifting from mission execution to the debriefing and administrative processes that would follow. The shot itself was only the beginning. Now came the political and bureaucratic machinery that would determine how success translated into future opportunities. Back at FOB Blackwater, they were met by Wright and a collection of intelligence officers eager to confirm mission success and gather tactical information about enemy capabilities and responses. The debriefing would be thorough, covering every aspect of the operation from insertion to extraction. But first, Ghost wanted to properly clean her rifle and secure her equipment. The M24A3 had performed flawlessly under extreme conditions, and it deserved the careful maintenance that kept precision instruments functioning at peak capability. The ritual of post-mission care provided structure to thoughts that threatened to spiral beyond immediate control. The debriefing took place in the same windowless room where Wright had offered her the mission 72 hours earlier. This time, however, the atmosphere carried the quiet satisfaction of successful mission completion, rather than the tension of untested capabilities under extreme pressure. 1,200 meters, single shot, confirmed kill on high-value target, Wright began, consulting reports that had already been transmitted to higher command levels. Initial intelligence suggests significant disruption of enemy command and control capabilities throughout the region. Ghost provided detailed accounts of environmental conditions, equipment performance, and tactical observations about enemy security procedures. Intelligence officers took notes, while communications specialists recorded her recommendations for future long-range interdiction missions in similar terrain. The M24A3 performed within specifications under extreme conditions, she reported. Wind measurement equipment provided accurate data despite variable mountain conditions. Target acquisition and engagement proceeded according to established protocols. Wright leaned back in his chair, his expression carrying the satisfaction of command decisions validated by successful outcomes. Ghost, I'll be direct. This mission has attracted attention at the highest levels. SOCOM wants to know if you're interested in specialized assignments with Tier 1 units. The offer hung in the air like smoke from a fired round. Special Operations Command represented the pinnacle of military precision capabilities, the units that operated beyond normal parameters in situations where conventional forces couldn't achieve necessary results. "What kind of assignments?" Ghost asked. "The kind where your specific skills determine mission success or failure. Long-range precision engagement in environments where mistakes aren't forgiven and second chances don't exist." Through the ops center windows, Ghost could see helicopters landing on the airfield, their rotors churning up familiar dust clouds that glowed golden in the afternoon sun. Marines moved between aircraft with the purposeful efficiency of professionals preparing for operations that would test their training under combat conditions. "I'll consider it," she said finally. Wright nodded, clearly expecting that response. "Take your time, but not too much time. Wars don't wait for anyone to make up their mind, and opportunities like this don't come around often." After the debriefing concluded, Ghost walked toward her quarters through the familiar rhythm of base operations, guard rotations, equipment maintenance, the constant hum of generators and radio communications that provided soundtrack to military life in combat zones. She found Reaper waiting by the mess hall, cleaning his equipment with the methodical care that characterized professional operators. He looked up as she approached, his expression carrying the quiet satisfaction of successful mission completion. "Ma'am, heard SOCOM might be calling. That's serious recognition for serious capabilities." Ghost paused, considering the implications of opportunities that had seemed impossible just days earlier. "What's your read on Tier 1 operations?" "Different world entirely. Higher stakes, more complex missions, working with people who operate at the absolute peak of professional capability." Reaper's voice carried respect for organizations that represented the pinnacle of military precision and effectiveness. "And the cost?" "Everything else becomes secondary. Family, personal relationships, normal human connections, all subordinated to mission requirements and operational security." His tone suggested personal knowledge of sacrifices required by elite military service. Ghost nodded, understanding the choice that lay before her. Professional redemption at the highest levels, but potentially at the cost of human connections that made life meaningful beyond military service and combat effectiveness. "Whatever you decide, ma'am, today proved something important. Some people are born for impossible shots under impossible conditions. The only question is whether you want to make that your entire life." That night, Ghost sat on her bunk cleaning her personal sidearm while her mind processed the events of recent days and their implications for whatever came next. The successful mission had vindicated skills that political maneuvering had attempted to suppress, but vindication came with its own complications and requirements. Outside her window, the base settled into its nighttime routine, while radio chatter coordinated patrol schedules and intelligence updates. The war continued its relentless progression, regardless of individual decisions or personal struggles with purpose and meaning. The offered opportunities represented everything she'd worked toward throughout her military career: recognition at the highest levels, assignments that utilized her unique capabilities, professional challenges that would test every aspect of her training and experience. But they also represented isolation from normal human connections and total subordination to operational requirements. Ghost field stripped her sidearm and began the familiar cleaning ritual, her hands moving with automatic precision, while her mind wrestled with questions that had no easy answers. Skills like hers were rare and valuable, but they came with obligations to use them in service of objectives that might not align with personal desires for connection and meaning. The M24A3 lay across her lap, its precision engineering a reminder of capabilities that transcended normal human limitations through technology and training. Tomorrow would bring new decisions about how to use those capabilities and whether professional excellence was worth the personal costs of specialized military service. But tonight, Ghost fell asleep to the sound of her own breathing and the distant hum of generators, her dreams filled with mountain winds and impossible shots that found their targets across distances that shouldn't have been possible. 6 months later, Ghost stood on the firing line at the Special,